Okay, this is for chapter 6 on the outbreak of war in Asia Pacific. So we'll be covering on Japan, and as usual, before you start the chapter, you should look at the textbook. Go to the last page of the textbook, which I won't have it on the screen here. You should be able to see that it is under one heading, and that is you are looking at the reasons why World War II break out in Asia Pacific. And the reasons given would be, okay, the first one you see on the screen, the ambition to establish themselves in Asia and Europe. The second one, hang on a minute, the crisis in Japan. Okay, the third one, expansionist foreign policy. Fourth one, weakness of the League of Nations. And the last one, I think, is foreign policy changes with regards to America. Now, the problem with this chapter, right, is that the five factors or reasons given, they kind of overlap each other, and it isn't done chronologically, so you might be a bit confused by that. But so the better way to organize this chapter would actually be to organize the chain of events chronologically. So you can use the textbook as a reference, and then you try to do your own notes based on the events that has taken place. Then you draw a mind map that is chronological, so it's according to the flow of events that take place. So for example, we're going to start off with the ambition, right? So after looking at the ambition, you would realize that stuff under the foreign policy changes, it might fit in here and there with regards, actually it doesn't really from the brief glance here. Okay, but wait, let me see. This one, it might fit into where what is happening at the front. I really don't like this factor, the Japanese expansionist foreign policy, because it overlaps with everything else, and the rest of the factors is sort of a causation to the foreign policy. Okay, if you're confused by everything I've just said, never mind, then you just ignore what I've just said. Then you start from here, and we'll look at the 5 factors for the reasons for outbreak of World War II in Asia Pacific. Okay. Now the question to think about, right, okay, that they have put down here, okay, ignore the Pearl Harbor thing and the video thing. If you want to go to the URI and check out the video on your own, that's fine, although I've never played that video before. The question here to think about, okay, do you think Japan had been forced to wage World War II? So when they ask you, do you think that they have been forced to wage World War II, with reference to the Pearl Harbor attack, then after you understand the chapter, come back again to this question and think about it. Okay, it can be a potential 12-mark SEQ for O levels, where they ask you, okay, Japan have been forced to wage World War II. How far do you agree with the statement? Explain your answer. Okay, and what pushed the USA to declare war on Japan? I think the question is very straightforward, because of the Pearl Harbor attack. Okay, so that's the overarching question. Okay, yeah, this is much clearer, right? The overarching question for this entire chapter. Okay, to what extent were they forced to wage World War II in Asia Pacific? Now, before we get to the factors itself, we look at the background to Japan's rise to power. Now, if you have been listening in my classes at all and not depending on just solely this video, then you would know that I would always start off the chapter by talking about Japan's social structure, right? So I don't have a slide here. Okay, let me just very quickly insert a very simple slide here. Okay, so we have okay, the farmer. That is okay. Before we get to the farmer, we have the samurai. Okay, then you have the farmer. You have the artisans, and then finally you have the merchants. They spell artisans correctly. Yeah, correct. That's the other spelling here. Okay, so this is the social hierarchy in Japan quite some years ago. I don't have a specific timeline for this, but basically the samurai are right at the top, followed by the farmers. Even though you might think that the farmers are, farmers, but yeah, in the Japanese society, they are more highly regarded because of their ability to produce food. And using common sense logic, you can produce food while the merchant cannot. You are more important, right? Because without food, you are going to die. That's the obvious part to it. So that's why the farmers are still quite highly regarded as second only behind the samurai. Artisans are people who can create things like if you build a table, you build a chair, you are considered useful. Whereas the merchants are people who like buy the table from the artisan, buy the rice from the farmer, and then they go on selling these goods, and they are quite worthless because they cannot produce anything on their own. They only take what other people have produced and then they go and sell it on the market. This is a very oversimplification of how the hierarchy is. I am in no position to actually guide you towards thinking of the specific ways, and that's not the intention of this, but this helps you to be able to think about how important the samurai are. Okay, the focus here is on the samurai. So the samurai being all important in Japanese history, they are military, they can also be governments as well. Okay, and so when the Meiji Restoration happened, it basically brought the Okay, let's talk about the Meiji Restoration first. Now, when the Meiji Restoration happened, it basically was putting the emperor back into power. Now, the emperor has never left. Okay, so before the Meiji Restoration, there were also other emperors called other names, but with the Meiji Restoration, it was putting back the emperor as a focus for them to modernize and strengthen Japan. And the ways to achieving that was to strengthen the military, the economy, and also to make the emperor the most powerful political figure in Japan. So with that, right, you would see that how in World War II when it was being fought, if you watch any movies that's got to do with Japan, you will see that they always go banzai and they, like long live the emperor, kind of Japanese way of long live the emperor. And then you have the military, which closely supports the emperor. So everything comes back to the emperor, and it becomes the focus. Like, are you honoring the emperor by dying for your country? That kind of things. Okay. So that's the Meiji Restoration. Of course, there's a lot of things that can be discussed through this, which we absolutely have no time for. But you can go and Google and find out more about Japan and their history and how they were opened up by this guy called Commodore Perry. Commodore is the rank in Navy, American Navy last time. Perry, P-R-R-Y, and the black ships. Okay, black as in the color black. Okay, and how they come upon Japan and force Japan to open up, and made them think that they need to actually modernize to be able to repel these black ships. Okay, the history and cultural legacies is something that I've touched on a bit previously. They were open to strong military leaders because of the samurai. Okay, not just the Tokugawa shogunate. The Tokugawa shogunates were a very strong samurai family who were in charge of Japan for some time because they managed to actually make Japan one again. But yeah, interested in that, go read up on that as well. And the few things that you see here on their culture, okay, they were highly respected, highly valued. Backing down or surrendering is perceived as dishonorable. To understand this more, go watch the movie The Last Samurai, where you would understand how it is like. And of course, the movie Last Samurai focuses on Tom Cruise being the last samurai, and that wouldn't happen in real life, okay, just in case you're wondering. Okay, let's move on. So we're looking at the first factor. Okay, my videos are limited by 15 minutes, so I have 5 minutes to actually cover this first factor, which isn't exactly possible, but I'll try. Now you can see the various things that happen there that are they are chronological, starting with the conflict with Russia, alliance with Britain, the conflict with China, the Sino-Japanese War, although okay, that actually goes out of chronology. Okay, so it's not chronological. Sorry, I stand corrected. Okay, so we start off with the first thing about the conflict with Russia. Now, if you look at a map, in a textbook, there would be many maps. Just refer to any one, the one with China and Russia inside, and you will see that they are connected at the sorry, not China, Japan and Russia, and they're connected at the top there. I think it's the Sakhalin Islands that are connecting Japan to Russia, and so in the proximity that they have to each other, the rise of Japan proved to be a threat to the Russian interests. Now, it is a period where everybody is collecting or have collected colonies, as you can see in Southeast Asia. Core history students, you should know what I'm talking about. The elective history students, it is a period of time when the different European powers, like for example, you look at the entire Southeast Asia, you will see that Singapore, Malaysia, Burma, we were all former colonies of Britain. You have Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all under the French. You have Philippines under the Spanish, followed by the Americans. You have the Holland Dutch people in charge of Indonesia. So this area is pretty much taken, but Korea, China is all are still up for grabs, and Russia is still considered a European power at the time because of their sheer size, and so they would want to actually have some kind of influence in this area as well. In the Asia area, not Southeast Asia, in the further north of us where we are. Okay, so they actually had influence in Manchuria. Let me clarify the Manchuria now once and for all. Manchuria is part of China, but in a textbook it would be regarded as a separate area, but now it has never existed as a country, don't be mistaken. Okay, it's always a part of China, but we will regard it as a separate area from China. So you will see Japan invading Manchuria, you will see Japan invading China. Then you might ask, they invade Manchuria, isn't that China already? No, the textbook regards it as two separate things. So for the purposes of this, in case the question asks you in a separate way, we regard this as two separate things as well. Okay, and the Russians tried to set up a permanent military naval base in Manchuria, and so this was a threat to their interest and influence in Korea. Okay, so Korea was formerly under Japan, and the Koreans really don't like the Japanese for reasons, well, like how our ancestors, our Singaporean ancestors, wouldn't like the Japanese either. Okay, so they tried to negotiate with Russia because of this conflict of interest, rejected by Russia, and they decided to declare war. Now, this is significant because this is the first time that an Angmo country fight an Asian country and lost. Okay, so that's the first time in history ever where an Angmo lost to an Asian country. So that happened in 1904 to 1905, called the Russo-Japanese War. And because of the Japanese victory, they gained this place called the Liaodong Peninsula. Again, refer to the map to see where it is. Basically influence in Manchuria. And the Sakhalin Islands, that was the one I was talking about that connects Japan and Russia together. Okay. So because Japan looks like Buey Pai now, they beat Angmo country, right? So another Angmo country will be thinking, hey, you're not too bad, come, let's sign an alliance. So the Anglo-Japanese alliance was signed between Britain and Japan, and this was in 1902, before the war, but it was renewed after the Japanese defeated the Russians. So Britain recognized Japan's right to defend Korea, while Japan recognized Britain's right to defend India. India, by the way, if you have no idea, they were also a former British colony. Yes, the really, really, really big India. Okay, so both agreed that China was a place of common interest. Now, what this means is that China was never colonized because of their sheer size. There's no one country that was able to colonize them. I know you can argue to say that India is also very big. How come Britain can take them? Well, that's another story for another time. You can go and check it out on your own. But China was so big that it was a place of common interest, not just for Japan and Japan and Britain, but for most European countries as well. So if you watch I used to watch these older movies called Huang Fei Hong, acted by Jet Li. And then if you notice some of the movies, it's always about him fighting the Angmos. Okay, and it's basically him fighting for China against the intruding foreign presence in China, and they're trying to kick them out. And in all these movies, you will see that the Angmos are always portrayed in a very negative lights because the Chinese is like losing their sovereignty, losing their rights to all these Angmos, and they are very, very unhappy with them. So all these movies would depict this kind of a particular scene in them. Okay, I need to pause here and please go on to the next video for the continuation of the next parts.